and welcome back to Bookish Theories. In today's video, we'd like to talk about Tomorrow by Together's 0 by 1 love song, focusing on a little breakdown and analysis of both the lyrics and the music video to see what they can tell us about the storyline and concept. 0 by 1 love song is a song co-written by Aram that deals with the themes of love, alienation, and loneliness. Now, the title of the song refers to the idea that in a world of zero, the you that they're singing about is the only one that can save them with their love, and much like many of Tomorrow by Together's songs, this concept is portrayed by focusing on the experiences that young people go through in the process of growing up. Now, in the video, this idea is conveyed since the very beginning with a quote by Kang Yoo-jung, who is a film and literary critic who is referenced to explain the concept of the chaos chapter as a whole. This is a quote from a review of a book by Park Ji-ri called Manhole, and in the article, Professor Kang discusses the way the imagery of the manhole can be seen as a metaphor for the psychological holes that people experience in life. According to the quote, adolescence is a moment of life that can be considered as a universal hole that affects every one of us in some way. No matter how much we are affected by it, when we grow up, all of us experience spiritual hunger and hollow holes, but some people are affected by these metaphorical holes in more complex way than others, and this is the case for the protagonist of the book that the professor is actually referencing. You see, in the novel, the protagonist essentially sees the manhole as a sanctuary where he can run away from the problems of his life. In the book, the manhole protects him from his father's violence and from his mother's indifference, but the voluntary isolation that the boy finds in the manhole also gives him access to the black hole that is inside of himself. You see, in the story that Professor Kang is talking about, the protagonist experiences growing up as a form of punishment that leads him to a hole of darkness that is too big for him to close. It's a story about growth, about depression, alienation, as well as the importance of friendship and love in overcoming these holes that threaten our growth, and as we'll see in a second, these themes are present in the Chaos chapter as well. Back in their performance at the Melon Music Awards, for instance, the idea that adolescence can be seen as a universal whole was actually portrayed with Yeonjun's chest being hollowed out by the chaos that surrounded them. That was the first indication that in the story, the loss of innocence that comes with maturity also left them with a sense of emptiness that is difficult to fill, and in the title track, this concept is further developed by portraying the boys with a frozen heart that can only be melted by love. Now, as I mentioned in some of my past videos, this imagery was inspired by The Snow Queen, which is a fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen where a boy named Kai is hit by the shards of a cursed mirror that freezes his heart and changes his perception of the world. This is a reference that was also confirmed by the most recent article on Weavers, and that will probably be further explored in the upcoming videos as well, but when it comes to our love song, this concept is portrayed with different references that when put together create the story of a boy who uses his imagination in order to find comfort in his solitude. Now, back in Blue Hour, this story was foreshadowed by showing us the boys holding on to the summer of their dream as they approach the autumn of their life. Back then, autumn was a season that represented maturity, and the desire to escape it was portrayed from Beomgyu's perspective, but now the focus is once again on Yeonjun, who is the protagonist of the video, as well as the character that is hollowed out by the experiences of his life. Much like the novel mentioned by Professor Kang, the story shows us that Yeonjun's youth is affected by his parents' conflicting relationship, as well as by a sense of loneliness that he struggles to control. In the video, we see that Yeonjun distracts himself by playing with video games, and right off the bat, this brings us right back to the game concept of the story, where games allow the boys to escape in a world of fantasy where they can essentially be whoever they want. As we saw in videos like Runaway and The Doom's Night, for instance, when they play, the boys can run away from reality and defeat the monster that puts them in danger. They can control the outcome of their quest, and they can embrace who they really are by playing characters that reflect their true identity, but this level of power and freedom is unattainable in real life, so Yeonjun reacts to his problems by acting up and stealing his parents' car. Now, if we look at his action in the context of the story, this is not the first time that we see Yeonjun stealing something, because back in Magic Island he also stole the candles on the train. These actions might be seen as small acts of rebellion that give Yeonjun a sense of power in a world where he's powerless, but the theme of rebellion is also explored in other ways, because the punk rock aesthetic of this comeback also implies an underlying desire to escape the norm and rebel against society. In the scene where the boys are performing, for instance, we see that Beomgyu is wearing a Black Flag shirt, and Black Flag is a punk band that is especially known for talking about social isolation, poverty, and paranoia. Their music focused on the struggle of living in an unfair society and on the desire to create your own rules in order to regain control over yourself. And in the story we know that the boys do the same, because when they run away into the world of fantasy, they create new rules that only apply to themselves. As we'll see in a second, however, this world with no rules will also be the source of their downfall, because the more the boys run away from reality, the more difficult it is to go back to it once the illusion is gone. Much like in Manhole, the dream that gives them comfort is also the reality that makes them fall into the black hole that is inside of themselves, but in the moment the boys don't realize it yet, because this fantasy is the only thing that is able to save them. As the lyrics tell us, in a world of zero, their loved one is their one and only. In this bottomless pit, they are the ones who bring light into their life, they shine like gold and they can melt the frozen world that they're actually sinking in. And in the lyrics, their need for this person is portrayed with a sense of yearning that leads them to beg for their loved one to say that they love them. You see, this desperation here comes from the fact that their lover is the only one that makes them want to live at a point of their life when they're ready to die. In a reality without hope, where they keep on losing the game of life, this love is the solution to the equation that they're trying to solve, so they're desperate for this connection, because in the story they know that this love is the only thing that can save them. In this context, the boys are anti-romantics. They're people who long for love, but they're so overcome by self-doubt that they basically sabotage themselves before they're ever able to get the love that they need. But when they find this person, they know that they love them, so they're ready to do anything in order to stay with them forever. Now, when it comes to the identity of this individual, I think that the song can be interpreted in different ways. If we take a look at the lyrics, for instance, the song seems to be talking about a romantic love towards a girl, but the imagery of the light in the darkness that shines like gold also brings us right back to the trailer and Nap of a Star, where the star and Huening Kai come through with their glow in order to save Yeonjun from the darkness. Now, if we talk about the star, then this song can also be seen as a message for Moa, who is the star of their story. In a world of darkness where the boys are struggling, the only thing that they know for sure is that they love you and they want you to love them in return. Even if they're full of problems, your presence improves their life and shine the light on their existence. So even if you can only meet in your imagination, they know that this love is real because they can feel it despite the distance that separates you. If in the past they were lovesick, now your presence has cured this illness and mended the hole that they had in their soul. So in the lyrics, they want you to do the same and use them like a drug in order to heal yourself from loneliness. This line, however, can also have a double meaning, because if on the one hand we can see the drug as a medicine that you take in order to heal, on the other, drugs can also cause addiction. So when they say to use them like a drug, it's also implied that they want you to become addicted to them, because in this way you will never leave. This is an idea that is actually very fitting to the punk concept that they are using, because the love that they're portraying is a love full of desperation and longing. But if we apply these themes to the storyline, then the you that they're singing about might also be seen as them actually singing about each other. As the lyrics tell us, the light that comes through in the darkness is almost seen as something sacred. It's something holy that literally saved them from the hole that hollowed them out. So like we saw back in Nap of a Star, this person is like an angel that is here to save them from their personal hell. Now this concept actually brings us right back to angel or devil, because back then the boys told us that they could either be angels or devils depending on the situation, and 0x1 Love Song actually uses this idea but with an unexpected twist. You see, in this concept, the holes that the boys experience can be said to bring the devil's side to the surface, and in this context, the devil is essentially the representation of all the loneliness, negativity, anxiety, and anger that the boys feel inside of themselves. When they are together, however, the boys are not devils anymore, but rather each other's angels, because their friendship brings out the best part of who they are, and the love that they give saves the others from themselves. Even if throughout the Chaos chapter the lyrics hint at the fact that the boys are doomed and there is no heaven waiting for them, their friendship brings heaven to them in a unique type of way. As the lyrics tell us, the boys want their angel to take them to their hometown, and in this context, the hometown of the angels, that is, the paradise that they can achieve, is none other than Magic Island, which is the fantasy world of their imagination where they can run away every time reality turns into their hell. Now this concept is actually connected to the Snow Queen because in the story they reference a passage from the Bible that essentially says that only children can get into heaven. This is a concept that the characters only understand when they are adults, and that refers to the idea that heaven is a place that you can only access if you maintain the innocent heart of a child. This means that even if the boys are growing up and they are losing their innocence, when they're together they become each other's angels because their presence leads them to a world of fantasy where this innocence is restored. Even if in the reality of the story they are doomed because the world is already destroying them, the Magic Island is a self-made heaven where they can find refuge and salvation because it melts their frozen heart. Now, as the article on Weavers confirmed, Magic Island is not a real place, but rather a location that only exists in their own mind. It's their representation of their friendship as well as a world of fantasy where magic and games turn real, so throughout the videos this island takes on different shapes because the location itself doesn't really matter. It can be a magical forest, a park, the virtual reality of the game, it can be Subin's backyard, a pool, or even a desolated location where there's nothing but themselves, and in the video we see Yeonjun running away to his Magic Island after stealing his parents' car. Now, even if in the video we see that Yeonjun goes on this journey with the others, by the end it is revealed that Yeonjun was alone all along, and this idea was actually foreshadowed all the way back in the Blue Hour comeback show. Back then, the animation showed us a boy on a train arriving in a town with a flying fish and a band of 4 animals playing instruments, and if you look closely, the town that we see in the background is very similar to the one that we see in the video as well. On top of that, the animation also referenced the band concept as well as the fish in the sky, so what we are seeing here is basically Yeonjun escaping his problems and finding comfort in his imagination. One thing that is important to point out, however, is that even if the video is showing us Yeonjun's fantasy, this doesn't mean that the other boys are not real, but rather that in this moment of his life the others are not with him and he's fantasizing about reuniting with them. Bear in mind, in the Doom's Night the video showed us that the boys are idols like in real life, and this idea is also reinforced by the band concept and by the concert tags that Yeonjun is wearing. On the bracelets we see the name of the title track as well as Tomorrow by Together, so much like in real life, in the story the boys are a group and they all exist. If in Blue Hour we saw Beomgyo's version of his fantasy, 0 by 1 essentially shows us the same thing but from Yeonjun's point of view, but throughout the video it is also hinted that the other boys are going through the same experience, because even if they are separated, the whole point is that they can reunite every time that they run away into their fantasy. You see, the entire concept here essentially implies that all of them use their imagination in the same way. All of their hearts are frozen, they all long for love, they all use their imagination to reunite because they all need to be saved from a world that doesn't accept them, and in the video this idea is portrayed in 2 different ways. If on one hand we have the journey sequence where Yeonjun steals the car and ends up out of town, on the other we also have the pool scene that he is imagining in his bedroom, both of which are inspired by 2 sources that imply a very similar message. As Subin confirmed in the media showcase, for instance, the sequence of the journey was actually inspired by The End of the Fucking World, which is a show that was also referenced in the concept trailer with Subin's shirt. Now, this is a show where a boy who thinks he is a psychopath steals his father's car and runs away with a girl, and even if at first he does so with the intention of killing her, the girl's presence in his life makes him feel emotions that he never experienced before. In the showcase, Subin compared this show to the journey that we see on screen because, much like in the series, Yeonjun's imaginary journey with the others saves him from his darkest thoughts and heals his pain with love. Both protagonists are alienated from society, they both find comfort in people that are just as troubled, and they find a light in the darkness that distracts them from self-destruction, and the very same themes can be found in the second fantasy as well, where the video actually references Stephen King's It. If in the scene we see them playing together in water like the scene at the quarry, Taeyeon is wearing Hades' cast where the word loser was turned into lover, and this reference is very important because, much like the Losers Club in It, the boys are anti-romantics united by destiny that find a sense of belonging in their friendship. Even if in the story all of them have their own traumas and their own problems, the losers become lovers because with their bond they're able to fight the evil that surrounds them and overcome their fears with the help of one another, and the very same thing happens in the video as well. The only difference here is that the healing experience that Yeonjun is having is actually taking place in his own mind, and this idea is confirmed by the fish imagery that we see throughout the video. If you look closely, when Yeonjun is in his bedroom, his character is either sitting next to an aquarium or looking straight at the fish with a lost expression on his face. And this is very important because the aquarium is actually a symbol of happiness in the dream. When Yeonjun looks at the fish tank, he's essentially looking at a floating world that can be compared to the unconscious mind that we access when we dream. As we see the video cutting back and forth between him and reality and the fantasies that he's having, we also see a fish appearing in the room as the reflection of the water on the walls gives the illusion that Yeonjun himself is in the aquarium with the fish. So what the video is showing us here is basically him diving into this fantasy and getting lost in it. What's interesting about this is that in the story, the boys are associated to a fish called Beta Splendens, which is a name that actually means beautiful warrior. This might refer to the idea that if in reality the boys are losers, in the fantasy that they share they become beautiful warriors that are able to realize their true potential like in the game that they were playing as children. Since fantasy is their paradise, in this paradise they are whole once again and they can find happiness and acceptance, so it's no surprise that when Beomgyu burns the car the boys are happy, because what Beomgyu did in this context is essentially destroying their connection to reality. If we see the car as a symbol of them going into the world of their imagination, Beomgyu destroying it means that now they're stuck in the fantasy, but even if at first glance this might seem like a happy ending, in reality this is not really the case. As I mentioned earlier, the manhole that the boys crawl into in order to find comfort also gives them access to the black hole inside of themselves, because when people get lost in a fantasy, they essentially forget to live and get overpowered by the very shadows that they're trying to escape. Now, since back in Runaway the boys referenced Harry Potter, this concept might have also been inspired by Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, because in the book Harry experiences the very same thing with the Mirror of Erised. In the book, Harry finds a mirror that shows him the biggest desires that are hidden in his heart, but when Dumbledore finds out, the professor stops him because those who came before him have wasted away in front of the illusion that this mirror provides. Even if sometimes it's good to find comfort in a fantasy, dwelling too much in dreams and forgetting to live will make you lose yourself in your own mind. And since in our story the world of fantasy is inside of the mirror, this reference seems to be extremely fitting. Like Harry gets lost in the reflection of the mirror, Yeonjun gets lost in the world that he sees inside of the fish tank, and his delusion becomes so realistic that when Taeyeon rips the castaway in his fantasy, Yeonjun snaps out of it only to find out that the fish has now been replaced by his friends. Now this is a clear indication that Yeonjun is so lost in his own imagination that fantasy and reality are mixing together. Even if he's alone, Yeonjun sees the others in front of him as if they were there in real life, so when this happens he starts dancing the mambo as he backs away into complete darkness. Now this is possibly the most important scene of the video, because what this scene is showing us here is literally Yeonjun falling into the black hole inside of himself. Much like in the teaser, him dancing the mambo is a reference to a scene from Days of Being Wild, which is a movie by Wong Kar-wai that deals with the themes of isolation, solitude, and the lack of direction and belonging. In the movie, Wong Kar-wai uses dancing and music as a way to highlight the social alienation experienced by the characters, and in the video the mambo is used in the same way, because Yeonjun is essentially dancing his way to his doom. Like they tell us in No Rules, the world of fantasy is a world where they can dance as much as they want, but the more they dance, the more this place becomes confusing, so even if they successfully escaped reality, their lack of direction leads them to the very doom that they were trying to escape. Now, as their Sputnik foreshadows, in the future this event will possibly take the storyline to a change of concept, because if the boys are falling into a metaphorical black hole, chances are that moving forward we might be seeing the story using a sci-fi concept to explore their journey into themselves. Like I mentioned in my past video, the boy version is full of references that not only portray the theme of alienation, but also straight up mention aliens and outer space, so this might imply that like in Manhole the hole is portrayed like a black hole, their journey into it might be portrayed as a journey in space. To know how this will play out, however, we'll have to wait and see. In the meantime, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please think about liking and subscribing. As always, thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye bye!